gives you some things for you to add to your notes there. And here for the download. I hope all of you got your download. Victor sent something out in advance. That was a first for me. I've never seen that before. That's very handy. And the next slide then, go ahead, Victor. Oh, thank you. So this just gives you an idea of some of the books that I do. And I thought maybe I would just do a kind of a quick introduction of myself here. I've been doing this since I got, when I say this, I mean everything from writing to trying to help others since I got cancer in the late 1998s. I had always wanted to write a book. I'd started out in journalism. I'd gotten distracted with family and other things. And so my husband and I just decided if I was going to write that novel, we were going to have to sell the shops, and that's what we did. And it's worked out wonderfully. I credit it actually with saving my life. I believe sometimes that our brains actually affect our physical health, and I think that that's what was happening to me, was that I was getting subconsciously more and more disturbed about not having been able to keep up with who I really wanted to be. So my idea was to just start digging into that novel I always wanted to write, which I did. And I learned probably more in the next 10, 15 years that I've been doing that than I ever learned before in my life. I was raised in Utah. I had suffered from some difficulties, like having an education denied to me because I was a female. Some difficulties like being a religious minority there. Always felt like I was a happy person, and I think I still am. But one of the things it did for me was it kind of made me reluctant to go ahead with things that I wanted to do. I always could find an excuse for not doing it, even though my mom would say things like, "Oh, you won't know if you don't try." And I think that's probably one of the most valuable things she ever said to me. If you don't give it a try, you'll never know if you could have done it. So it certainly was just sort of born of the culture and the situations from the time. It was both similar to today and a lot different. I should back up and tell you that I just celebrated my 81st birthday. And so I'm not a newcomer. I'm not a newcomer to life. I've got a lot of stories to tell, and you're going to hear a few of them today. So so one of the first things I wanted to talk to you a little bit about. Why don't you do the next slide, Victor? This is a magazine I read just not too long ago. It's Psychology Today. You'll see I put a little section there that says imposter syndrome. I'm kind of a psychology buff, but I'd never heard of the imposter syndrome. I probably always suspected there was such a thing, but I think it keeps a lot of writers from doing the things that they want to do. And that became especially evident to me when I realized how important marketing was in the new world of publishing that I was entering. I entered just about the time that ebooks were becoming popular, and that people were publishing their own books other than what had been called, what did they call that? I hate the word, so I've forgotten it. They called it, help me, Victor. they called it vanity publishing. And that is,
Right.
it was so derogatory. It was a crappy term. And so I tried not to use it because to switch over to indie, which is far more acceptable and becoming more acceptable every day, I believe. But when I started out, it really wasn't. And so here I am thinking, oh, how many times have I let that I'm not good enough thing happen to me? And because I had had a lot of marketing experience, both as a journalist and in marketing itself and in retailing, which surprisingly enough really, really helped with the new kind of publishing, because we are just retailers at heart if we're publishing ourselves. I would imagine most of you are not self-published. Would that be right? Where are we in this crowd? Most published with a publisher, or do we have several self-publishers, or what do we have here?
Let's try raise your hand if you're self-published, mostly.
Okay, let me go back to see. A few.
Keep those hands up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I had tried publishers before and moved into self-publishing, was in self-publishing for years. And then without much luck, really, I didn't have very good ones, frankly. And then when I hit 80, I'm beginning to feel like I needed a partner publisher, somebody to partner with me. And I'd worked with Victor before, and I called Victor.
I remember that call.
Part of my entry that we kind of missed today was that was to thank him for just saying yes when I hit him with this monster query via telephone, which was totally against protocol. And it worked. And it was like, yeah, that's an affirmation of what this psychology today was trying to tell me. If I thought too much about it, I might have not done it that way. I might not have done it at all. But I have been really pleasantly surprised what the difference it's made in terms of the time available to me, in terms of what I'm learning. I mean, it's been fantastic. But I'm here to tell you that I'm not fully convinced still that traditional publishing is for everyone. I think there's a way to publish for every title and every personality and every pocketbook. So I approach everything I do from that standpoint. Just because you haven't had any luck getting a publisher, or because you're afraid to, or whatever, we'll talk about that. But life is different today than it was even 15 years ago in the publishing world. And you can do it. You know your book better than anybody else. You could probably be your own best PR person, because any PR person just is going to need you to give them all the information they need to work with anyway. And that never is enough. And you can even learn to love marketing. Are any of you here today because you haven't marketed, or you don't want to market, or you believe marketing is beneath you because you're so creative? Any of you? Come on.
Raise your hand if raise your hands if you hate marketing and you don't want to do it.
No, well, that's the best news I've heard all day. I don't see any of you. Let's see. Let me scroll here. No hands. All right. You guys are chicken. So anyway, let's go on. Let's go on to the next slide, Victor. But I want to assure you that you can market and that you can do a great job. But first of all, you've got to get over any reluctance to market. So these are some of the things that I have done. Anything you do will be different. Each of us is different, but I believe it needs to be visual. First, I'm going to back up a little bit. I have a saying that I learned from 12-step program when my daughter was having trouble as a teenager. and you take what you want and you leave the rest alone. So when I talk about anything that's a little bit too wooey for you, you just, you get to discard it. Most of my stuff comes from Rhonda Byrne, an author and a very famous one who wrote The Secret. I try to listen to her CD when we're taking long trips, at least once a year. And of course, she talks about vision boards. And I think they work. I use the word manifested. I manifested a trip to see the Lascaux drawings in the caves in southern France by posting a picture of the caves on my bulletin board. But these are two permanent things I did. I don't know whether you can see my arrow. Can you see my arrow on the you can't. The picture on the left, in the right-hand corner, there's a little shelf of books. And that is a shelf of books that it started out just being the books that I published, and it used to be on my piano before I gave my piano away. But it started to grow, and I realized that because I was working with authors, I was going to be listed in a lot of other things in acknowledgments and things like that. So it started just over to the other side, if you can do it, Victor. That shelf of books. So I just started collecting the ones where my name was mentioned or I was quoted or whatever. And that made me feel really, really more confident about the good I'd been doing on my down days for other authors as well as myself. So that was where that started. Now the other picture I started after this, and that was when I started redoing my bedroom after I realized my daughter was never going to come home to use her bedroom. That's my wall of accolades, if you will. And it does what this doesn't, because the shelf of books isn't quite as evident. Go all the way over to the other photo, Victor. There's another photo. There's another photo at the same time. It just takes time.
Okay.
It's got the yellow frames on it.
All
There.
right.
There you go.
Gotcha.
Okay, I took that just for you. Those are all IKEA frames, very inexpensive. And I have it right behind my computer where I can see it. And sometimes I use it for reference. Like I can never seem to remember the name of the little certification I got for teaching from UCLA when I was teaching there. They have a marvelous program for their instructors where they demand that you take classes in education, but then you have the option to actually get a certificate. I'll tell you a little bit later about speaking, but one of those, that little one right down there, kind of in the middle by the blue ribbon, is a small certificate they issued once you completed, I don't know, I think it's 35 or 65 hours or something like that in the School of Education. So they did it because they wanted their teachers, their instructors. They choose their instructors. UCLA is an excellent extension program, by the way, if you're looking for great classes. They're not inexpensive, but I encourage my clients to use them because most of the classes are done by critique. So you end up paying for a great critique group with people who already know how to critique because they've had the experience of these classes. And you end up with a lot more than just having taken a class in terms of networking and that kind of thing. Especially if you're interested in screenwriting or ever will be. They have an excellent screenwriting section. But these classes were all taught by master instructors, and it was a wonderful way. But I can never remember the name of it. It's just called something like instructor's certificate, and I always think it should be fancier than that. So I run over to my wall and look at it rather than looking it up on my computer. So anyway, those are two things that you can do to give yourself confidence. One of the very first experiences I had with getting over this I'm not good enough syndrome was UCLA, in fact. I really thought I wanted to teach a class in marketing to authors because I could see that that was the coming thing in the early 2000s, that the authors were coming to this with the idea that they didn't have to do it. That was born of traditional publishing from years ago, when traditional publishers, especially the big ones, had huge marketing budgets that they could work with and did. And authors, all they really had to do is sit back on their bottoms and maybe go to a book signing now and then. But even that required some speaking skills and that kind of thing. So they did some marketing, but nothing like we need to do today. We really need to learn some marketing to really build a platform so that we can even find a publisher. Is that right? Is that right, Victor? Would you say?
Yes, I agree.
Would you say that the two people with interesting properties probably will get your nod more easily if they have marketing behind them?
Absolutely. That's one of the things I look for, is people who are connected to the world.
Well, that's a great way to look at it too. So anyway, I went to UCLA. I wasn't going to go. I had to be at a party, and I said, well, they'd never accept me because I don't have a graduate degree. And in fact, it took me 17 years to get a degree. Speaking of I almost missed out on an education when I finally did decide that in spite of the attitudes of the 50s, that women didn't need degrees and that probably shouldn't get degrees, I decided to get one. It took me 17 years because of our moving around and children and et cetera. But I took a class every single one of those 17 years. And then ended up with several universities not wanting me because I was into my senior year and they preferred not to give degrees to somebody who had only taken 8 hours from their school. So it was kind of a mishmash of experiences. But anyway, he said, oh no, they hire on experience. They want people who are experienced because that's in a sense more valuable, and they do this training stuff for you so that you can have all the educational information that you need. So I bravely made an appointment, went in, told the head of the entire writers extension division that what I really wanted to do was write an ebook for poor starving students on marketing that was absolutely aimed at authors, because there wasn't anything out there for authors. There were marketing books. Then I knew marketing, but I already learned that general marketing wasn't enough for authors, that we needed something more specific than that. So, and I expected kind of a hum-ha, because that's who I was. And she just looked at me and said, you're hired. So, so getting over that, I'm not good enough, or my credentials aren't good enough, or whatever. So that's kind of my overall theme for today. So let's move on to the next slide, Victor. What is great marketing? Well, or never say buy my book. Never. Never. Well, you know, I probably see that on my Facebook page twice a week. And a lot of those people have read my book and know they shouldn't be saying that. Marketing isn't about me, and it isn't about you. Coca-Cola knows that. And they're my single biggest model. It's about finding your comfortable voice, loving your book, but it's about your reader. And you're trying to find your specific audience, who your reader is, what they want, how they can either be helped or entertained or whatever it is your book does, that's what you're after. And here's where people fail. New authors come into it thinking that it's about selling, and that's one of the things that makes them so reluctant to do any marketing themselves. It seems crass. It seems crass to them. So one of the things I like to encourage you to do is, regardless of where you are in your process, reread your book. Reread it with your marketing bonnet on, and go beyond your genre. You know what you write. You know that you write historical novels or romance novels, or in my case, literary novels. But that's just a fraction of your audience. With your marketing hat on, you're looking for all the possibilities for selling your books. So because I'm a storyteller, I'm going to tell you the story of my first novel, which, yes, you could still read on the new and used feature on Amazon, but it's still out of print, so I don't get any royalties. It's called This Is the Place. It's a literary novel, and it wasn't selling very well. And so I got a hold of it and read my own book. This is what I found. It's a women's novel. It was set in Salt Lake City, just before the Winter Olympics. Is that lucky, or is that lucky? There's a lot of gender and religious discrimination allusions in it, because it's based on my own life, probably. And and there are tons of organizations like that out there. The final chapter where the protagonist discovers herself is set in New York. She wants to go to journalism school at Columbia, which is another whole group of people, journalists. So the Olympics turned out to work well because, again, I put on my I can do it hat. It was hard, but I just decided that as long as I had retailing, this was 2004, 2003, I could actually sell my books to bookstores, even though everything on the web was saying that if you are just being published or being published by a small publisher, this one was a very small publisher, there's no point in even trying for bookstores, and certainly not in an airport. So I ignored them. I put together a marketing program that I actually learned from my daughter when she was managing one of our retail stores. And I'll tell you what it is. We had upper end stuff like Yadro, Hummel, Waterford Crystal, etc. And this couple came through and they were selling long stick lollipops. And our immediate reaction, no, that's not our store. And they said, we'll tell you what, you take 6 dozen, and if you don't sell out in a month, you don't have to pay for them. You can do that with books too. So you tell someone that you'll send it out with a point of purchase. That means right next to the cash register, right? A point of purchase box. They have to buy 12. And if they don't sell through in, say, 90 days, which is more the industry standard, that they don't have to pay for them. Not one of my people refused to pay. And I got about 4 different bookstores, especially in airports, that flew direct flights from their city to Salt Lake City. And I got 3 bookstores in Salt Lake City where the people were going for the Winter Olympics that year. So this little practically self-published book, because they weren't doing, my publisher wasn't doing any marketing for me, I can tell you that much. They actually sold through books, or at least said they did, and went ahead and paid for their books. And 3 of the 4 reordered. So that was how I got my books in. And it took bravery, and it took a bit of a bribe, and it took nerve. Even more than bravery, it took bloody nerve. So that was how Olympics from my reading worked in. In the book, the protagonist meets her boyfriend on the hills of Alta, Utah, where some of the Olympic events were. So, so what about this? What about places in your books? You want to sell to libraries. So an easy way to do that yourself, regardless of what your publisher might be doing, is taking it state by state according to the places that you are going to, according to the places that are actually in your book as settings. And you hit each state, because there's a lot of libraries in each state. You hit them one at a time. You do your work on Google. You find the acquisition librarians if you can't. If not, you find the librarians who handle events, and you send them a personal email now. Back then I was doing real letters. Real letters might still work just even better, but the email's faster and you get to more people. And I asked them to put my books in, because there were parts of the book that were set in that area. So I started out with Utah, and Utah was the first state I did. I did New York, and I did some of the southern states, because there's a little story in there about when my husband and I were traveling back east, back in 1961, believe it or not. We actually heard the riots go on in Selma over the airwaves at night. When you're driving, you can hear the airwaves over the night air really clearly. So so that's how I use the different places. And I found out that it was at least fairly successful later when I started buying an occasional book from Amazon's new and used section. And I found that out because a lot of the books that I bought used happened to be from libraries who sold it like 15 years later. And they still had the pockets from the libraries in them, or they had special, they'd ordered special library bindings because they can't just use paperbacks, and it wasn't published in hardback, that kind of thing. Journalism, I contacted journalism schools across the nation and tried to find people who taught journalism who could use my book as a text. I also tried to get them to use the other books that I'd been writing, the Frugal Book Promoter, in extension division, in marketing departments, etc. And that worked pretty well. I could tell when that was working, because I would get like 40 orders for teaching. And you can see why I needed some help at some point. I was doing all this myself. And most of this stuff I actually put into the Frugal Book Promoter. There's nothing in the Frugal Book Promoter that I haven't tried myself and wasn't able to tell you exactly what worked for me and what didn't. And I wasn't shy about telling you what didn't. So that's the kind of thing you can get. And if you haven't done that, please do it. Or at least start jotting down things that you think of when you think of them, if you don't want to reread your own books. So now let's go to the fact that the point that it's never too late. That's really important. And I build this more as a way to tell you how to launch your book or to relaunch it. One of the things I'm trying to get people to do is understand that a book can be relaunched. And that's what Victor did for me. He helped me relaunch in its third edition, the Frugal Book Promoter. So Book Baby used it, gave away 35,000 copies that were downloaded for the second edition. And so I've been relaunching that book all along, and Book Baby in their advertising called it a classic. So it encourages me to tell other people that whether you write a novel or whether you write nonfiction, there are certain books that actually qualify to become classics. And that the same techniques that we're going to talk about today work for relaunching another book, a book maybe from your back catalog, and just count in general for making your whole career more successful. We don't want to be one book authors. We want to continue. I think that's the whole idea behind series, right? So we want to use the forever parts of marketing, especially reviews and a couple of other things that we'll talk about, to not only launch a book, but also to relaunch a book, or to just keep a book in front of the public. And back when I was starting, the internet was just getting started. I mean, we live in miracle times now. You can reach so many people with the web. It's so much easier to do this than it used to be. So forever reviews, if you look at that, let's go back to the last slide, please, Victor. Yeah. This book right here, you can see it's all porcupine by a reader of mine, is about getting great book reviews. And that is one of your most valuable now and forever kinds of promotions. I'm going to talk to you a little bit. I'm going to just say it once to make it really stand out. I don't want you to write it down or tattoo it on your forehead or some such thing. Book reviews are your most valuable long-term kind of promotion. So, so it's really important that you not only learn how to get book reviews, but what is important to book reviews. The other thing I want you to use to tattoo maybe on the back of your hand is do not pay for them, please. They have no credibility in the industry. And trust me, the people that count, like agents, like publishers, like librarians, like bookstore buyers, they know the difference between a paid for review and one that isn't. In fact, if you pay that huge fund sum that Kirkus charges you for a review, they still make sure that in the magazine that they make it clear which ones are paid for and which ones aren't. So you think you're getting the name of Kirkus behind you, and handled correctly, you can kind of make that work. But everyone knows that there is that paid for kind of a stream there, and they don't have as much value as they had when Kirkus was doing real journalistic, authentic, credible reviews by people who weren't your mother. So don't pay for reviews. There's all kinds of free ways you can get reviews. You can ask your mother, have her do one. That, in my opinion, is better than paying $395, $595 for a review. You will see occasionally, you will see somebody out there who will say that the review is free, but it's part of their approach to getting you to enter their contest or something. And you know, not quite so bad. At least they say they're free and they don't force you to enter their contest to get it. So I guess they're free. But be a little bit careful about the kinds of things that are going to happen for you. Now, the second thing we want to talk about is using contests. Because if I see once, I see twice, 3 times a week, let's go to the, let's see, what number one is that? That is, what one is that? That says contest down here. That's, I think it's 6.
Number 9.
Number 9? Really that far? Okay, I'm getting way out of order. You're in trouble. You're in trouble. Forever marketing. See, I told you I wouldn't use my I wouldn't use my outline, the outline I gave you. Okay, contest. If I see once, I see at least, I see so often. Some new author, usually first-time author, usually self-published, but not necessarily, complain about contests and how not valuable they are, and on and on, and what scams they are. Yes and no. It's probably going to be up to you to figure out which ones are and which ones aren't. But here's what you look for. On this slide, you will see slide. I guess you're doing that so that it's easier to read. But let's slide out a little bit so that.
Sure.
Let's slide in. Yeah. Okay. Extra value awards. This one is an extra value award. This was for my book of poetry. This is Writer's Digest print from the page where they announced awards. And this is the critique they gave me. Now, it was expensive, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's valueless. First of all, it has that fantastic name, Writer's Digest, behind it. Second of all, you get that critique that you can reuse as a blurb on all the places that we use blurbs, everything from posters to even your checks. There's this announcement in Writer's Digest. Those are the kinds of things that you look. So you're getting that kind of thing for your $89.95. That you get that critique even if you're not a winner. So you're getting something back for your money, even if you don't win. That automatically means that it's not a scam. Okay, the next one is free entry awards. On the other side of this slide is a book that I wrote with Magdalena Ball. It's also a poetry book. And this is the Life Award. It comes from Dr. Robert Rich. And it is, and he happens to be one of Victor's babies, his authors. And he's really interested in the environment. So he started this Life Award. There's no entry fee to it. He does it absolutely free for the good of the planet. He intends for the list of books that he accepts for that to be used as references. And I understand I have a good friend who has been working with Al Gore's program, where they recommend it to find books for teaching, books for reference, resources, etc. They can go to his site and find all kinds of books that they might not otherwise know about. And his book is, I wrote this down on mine, but not yours because it was too late. Here's the email for that if any of you interested. It's bobswriting.com/life.html. Okay. Now, the next one is extra value excerpts and critiques. Writer's Digest, Self-Publishing Awards. Sometimes they have, even the big magazines like Writer's Digest have contests where it's limited to self-publishers. That's okay. That's okay. It's still a huge honor to to be chosen. But all-inclusive awards work too. And yes, if they have all-inclusive awards, you actually have a chance for a self-published book to be playing with the big boys and girls. Only recently it dawned on me that there are certain kinds of awards out there that you can get for your book before it's been published. And that is a huge advantage when you're writing a query letter to an agent or a publisher. The one that I got an award for was B. Lynn Goodwin's Scintillating Beginnings. You'll find her at writeradvice.com. That's not writer's advice, it's writeradvice.com. And you submit just the first chapter of your book, but you get the award, and then you can start marketing it, advertising it, shouting it out on Twitter, whatever you need to do. And then here's another one. I think they were forced to change their name, but USA Book News. A lot of my books have a USA Book News award. I use them before they change their name, but you might find something else that's equally prestigious. And the reason I'm saying prestigious is that most readers, they may recognize Pulitzer, they may recognize Nobel, but they don't recognize every award name. So even back here on using extra value for just about any award, whether it's for self-publishing award or whatever, even then, your win, place, or show has value in terms of marketing it. But it will have extra value if it has a name that, okay, I'll just say it out loud, that the reader mistakes for a big time award when it's not all that big time award. It doesn't mean that it's fake. It doesn't mean that it's not credible. It doesn't mean that it's cheating, but most readers won't know. I didn't know till after I'd won this the first time, but most people thought I had an award for US Book News, USA Today Book News.
Right.
And they probably still do, because it still carries that award. And yes, I still use it. The first time I won a USA Book News Award was in 2004, and I'm still using that. It's won it since then. It doesn't have the same name anymore. I'm still using it. Here's a big tip. I use it without dates. You are not obligated to tell the date of every award or every that you get or every book that you publish. One of the jobs of your PR person, if you have one, is to bring the best blossoms forward. You're making a bouquet. If you were a florist, you might have some that are a little bit droopy that tomorrow will be absolutely dead, but those go in the back and the best blooms come forward. That's your job. You've got a bloom here. It's an award. You don't have to make it look like it's drooping by mentioning when it came from, unless it's a recent one. And then we're looking for special categories. The Eric Hoffer Book Award has a legacy award as an example. And the book has to be a lot older than 2 years. So if any of you have a book that you're relaunching, there's an award you could use. Or if you have a book that's a little on the literary side and hasn't got much attention, because after all, it's not a science fiction, which sells obviously better than literary. That's an award that you could use to give it a little boost. It's at hofferaward.com. My husband won it for his book, Everything Foreigners Need to Know About America from A to Z, which was also chosen, at least in part because of this award, for one of the major international education groups as a recommendation for their students who are coming to America to study. So your awards, you not only should try to get some, you should be proud of anyone that you win. You should use anything that you get out of it, like excerpts from the critique that praise your book. There's a lot of possibilities for making it pay for itself. So let's go back to reviews. I just mentioned excerpts. One of the biggest things that people miss, that's number 6, I think.
Let's see.
Which one is that? Let's talk a little bit more about what to do with reviews. One of the biggest things people miss is excerpting. They get caught up on the whole scare routine about what you can copy with and get away from it, get away with it legally. Amazon, I figure that they have must have really good lawyers on staff. So I use theirs. Anything under 25 words you can quote and feel pretty safe with. So the reviews that you get were intended for publication to begin with, and you can take quotes from them, excerpts from them, and there are exact directions in that book on how to do that and make them look authentic. You use ellipses if you have to leave out some long wordy parts or something like that. You use ellipses to make them authentic. But you take out excerpts and you use them for blurbs. Any place you can think of that you can use blurbs. You can use them as, I'm sure you noticed on some of these slides, you can use them as mottos. Almost on all these slides, there's my motto. That was suggested to me by a blurb, but I adapted it. You can use it on your websites. You can use it. I use a lot of excerpts on the new website that I just had done for me. My first website I did myself, that I used different blurbs on all of them. Reviews and blurbs are really cousins. They are somebody else saying that they loved your book or they loved a part of your book. They're one of your best sales tools. But obviously, it's impossible to publish a whole review everywhere. These excerpts are not being used enough by, I'd say, 90% of authors, whether you have a publisher or not. Get those best excerpts out there. If you want an example, go to my website. It's just howtodoitfrugally.com. And my website developer has done little moving carousels that include lots of excerpts that gives you an idea of how to use those excerpts. Or you can get it step by step from how to get great book reviews, the book. So we've done reviews and we've done contests. Let's go to number 8.
All right, hold on.
Forever marketing tools, what leads us to Amazon. Amazon today now has a whole section where you can add stuff yourself in terms of reviews, and you can even put blurbs up on one of the places it calls reviews. You do it through Author Connect, and your first job when you leave us this afternoon is to go on Amazon and see if the buy page where people go to actually buy your book looks neglected, could you say? And if it does, your next step is to go to Author Connect, find the place where you can add some reviews, add some blurbs, add a section from about the author or from the author, and get those up on your buy page. I know that some of you probably hate Amazon. Go ahead and hate it. It's okay to hate it, but don't neglect it. You can't get by and do well with your book without Amazon. It's as simple as that. There are a lot of other good places, but Amazon is it. So if you're time limited, take care of Amazon first. If you have trouble with this assignment, you've got a handout to look at. Be sure to download it. And if you are still having trouble or need help because you're running out of time or whatever, here are some places where you can get help. The bottom one, Penny Sansevieri, you can reach her at amarketingexpert.com, is a full service publicist, but she will work with you on individual projects. And for those who have a PR person, or those of you who are thinking about getting one, I strongly recommend that you work with PR people on individual projects, and that you don't use them as somebody to do something for you. You treat them as a partner. You give them what you have to give them what they need anyway. You treat them as a partner, and you pick their brains so that you learn from them, so that the next time around, if you shouldn't be so flush that you can afford that person again, or even another person, you have some tools to work with that you didn't have with before. That's really making your PR dollar stretch. The other one I've recommended, and I've worked with her for years, is Denise Casino at Bestseller Services, only one S.com. She is a whiz with Amazon ratings, Amazon categories, and she does online launches that are to die for, most of which reach #1 in their categories, which gives you more marketable information that you can use, that you can then always say #1 bestseller stickers and labels everywhere you are on the web. So but it isn't inexpensive, and if you decide you want to do it yourself, you can find the information on how to do that in the Frugal Book Promoter. That would be an online book launch. And online book launches aren't just for launches, they're for launches of later books. If your ratings on Amazon start to poop out, you can easily relaunch them using an online book launch. That's pretty much where you contact bloggers, people with websites oriented toward your specialty if you're doing nonfiction, or maybe some of your themes if you're doing fiction, for them to interview you, for them to use reviews, whatever. Maybe you could offer them tips. There's something out there that I didn't think to include in this, but I will, because as long as I've thought about it, there are lists of 10 tips. I have a 10 tips called Everything You Wanted to Know About Utah, but Were Afraid to Ask. You could probably find something that's for fiction. So you can probably find something like that to do for your book. Newspapers like them because they fill in little spots, little fillable spots that they have after they've done their layout for the day. But they can be used all kinds of different ways, and that's another way that you could use some of these. You could pitch to some of these bloggers and websites using some of your tips in I don't know, maybe along the bottom of the of your media, their media kits, or maybe as headers, or maybe just something to promote, or maybe they're doing a series and they need tips at the beginning of it. I have 10 myths about self-publishing that writers need to know, that kind of thing. So again, if you're rereading your book, you can keep that in mind as you're reading. So as far as our Amazon, you're worried about that. You should be worried about that buy page. If you're published by a publisher, they should probably have included your categories. If they have not done that, and the handout isn't sufficient to help you with that, that's something you need to do. I have another handout. I'll find it for you in the bowels of my computer somewhere that tells you how to do that. The trouble is that Amazon changes their minds and reconfigures everything about every 2 minutes, and it may not be up to date. So that's why you didn't get it this time. But Amazon also has a place where you can add videos and your reviews on Amazon. You can review books for others. Do you have a profile page? Do you have a profile page? That's probably the most important thing you can do after just checking up on your buy page. Your profile page is the one where every time your name is linked on Amazon, anywhere, it gets linked to your profile page. Mine is, I made it into a bit.ly, which I love, bit.ly/Carolyn's Amazon profile. That's Carolyn's with a capital C, Carolyn's, capital P for profile, capital A for Amazon, AMZN, capital P for profile. That'll give you an idea of what that page looks like. It lists all my books. I feed my Twitter stream to it. I feed my blog to it. It could be substituted in many ways for a website. But its biggest value is that people who follow it, and you should encourage people to be following it, actually get free of charge from Amazon. All those people, when you put out your next book, Amazon notifies them free of charge with a beautiful email, with a colored image of your book, and one of your pictures that you've already installed, hopefully, on your buy page. It's absolute internet magic, and one of the reasons for you to change your mind and love Amazon. So that's just among the many things that you can be doing with Amazon. And there's a lot on that in the new book, the Frugal Book Promoter, which is, after all, according to Book Baby, my classic. Okay, it's almost 12. What am I going to do here, Victor? How much time do I have? Do I need to take questions, or?
Well, let's take some questions from everybody. I'm going to try and unmute everybody. and we'll just let people ask away. What is your most vexing marketing problem? We want to know about it.
My most vexing marketing problem is time, and having Victor has really helped with that.
Brandy, do we have anybody waiting for a question?
No. But let's go a little bit more into time.
Great.
No hands.
No hands. Not seeing anything in the chat. So if anyone's having a problem with audio, you can always, if you click on the little 3 buttons in the right-hand in the, well, lower or upper corner, a little chat. It'll give you an option for chat too.
Okay.
But I am not seeing anything from anyone.
Does anybody want to talk about book proposals?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Book proposals aren't just for nonfiction anymore. They're for fiction too. My agent had me write a book proposal for the memoir that she's handling right now. The booklet that Victor published this year is only take you about 30 minutes to read. It tells you fast, and it helps with all the things that people usually don't get right, including the idea that book proposals should give a early overview of your book and your program, so that they don't have to wade through a long proposal, although they may need everything that they say they need in a proposal. When I wrote my first proposal, I read 3 long books. It took me longer to read up on book proposals than it took me to write the book proposal. I don't think anybody should spend, speaking of time, that much time doing it, and that's why the Great First Impression book proposal came out. Another thing, it should reflect your voice. Most people get really staid about book proposals and query letters for that matter. Suddenly they put their business hats on. They think that they're writing a business letter or a business document, and frankly, nobody wants to read them. Put yourself in the position of an agent or a publisher. How many stacks of stuff they might have on their desk that they have to get to each day. You want your voice to catch them immediately. You don't want it to be a different voice than you use in your book, but it probably won't be if it's you writing it. So don't be afraid. One of the people who read my book said that she originally had quoted some dialogue in her book proposal, and she was afraid to use it, but maybe she wouldn't be afraid to use it after she read this book. Yeah, I don't think you should be afraid to use some dialogue. You're going to have to, you should probably include a clip from your book anyway, usually a first chapter, but some kind of a clip from your book anyway. There's going to be dialogue in that. That's going to reflect your voice. But right from the beginning, when you're doing that overview, let the you come out.
Okay, I have a follow-up with that. In sending a book proposal to a publisher, do I already need to hire a literary agent? To my understanding, we should have a literary agent when we market our book to a publisher.
You must have a publisher. Oh, really? Well,
No. What I mean is, usually we hire, to my knowledge, usually we hire a literary agent when we want to market our books to publishers. But a book proposal is whether we need already a literary agent or we just send a book proposal ourselves to the publisher.
Well, if you don't have if you use an agent, they're going to ask for one anyway. So when help,
Oh, okay.
so if you help, I mean, if you've got a good agent, they're going to ask for one anyway. So you
Yeah.
might as well have one written before they ask. Otherwise, it's going to take you some time. They might forget you between the time you wrote them a query letter and the time you get your proposal to them. The other thing is that if you decide not to go via agents, say you decide to submit your book to publishers without an agent, which you can do. I mean, the idea that you have to have an agent, number one, and then a publisher, that's the way I started out too. That's the way it was in the 80s and 90s and 70s and 60s and 50s and long before that. That's not the way it is anymore. It's nice to know those methods because the publishing industry is really traditional. They really like their traditional approaches to things. But even the publishing industry is different than it was. We've got the big five, which are really like the big, like 1,000 of people with big names, lots of big names, some of them as imprints. We've got smaller publishers who are still true traditional publishers. We've got smaller publishers who are partner publishers. They publish, but they say right up front that they don't market. And a book is not published if it isn't marketed. If it isn't marketed, it hasn't been fully published. We've got people who fully publish it that are more akin to the vanity publishers I mentioned before. Some of them are quite good, and some of them are kind of want to avoid because they're so identifiable, and there is so much prejudice still going around. A lot less than there used to be, but still a lot. And I'm going to avoid using those names, but if you want to email me and ask me to, I'll tell you. I won't tell them all to you, but I'll tell you a few of them. That's how I got corralled with my first book. It was published by a small publisher who claimed that they were traditional publishers, and they were soon bought out by what we call vanity publishers now. And so I ended up actually having that book published. First it was called America House, and then it was called Publish America. Anybody heard of Publish America?
Oh yeah,
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. It was so immediately identifiable. So that made that problem of getting my book into bookstores much, much harder, and I still did it. So I'm not saying that there isn't any occasion when you want to use those publishers. There may be, but I think it's pretty much a last resort unless there's a very good reason to use them.
Caroline, let me follow this with you. With many ways for us to self-publish, why would we bother to use vanity press? I don't understand, because right now we can self-publish through Create Space, for example. Why would we pay for a vanity press?
Yeah, well, because we each have different needs. If you completely self-publish, that is often used incorrectly. That means that you are doing everything. You're doing the formatting. If you need a cover, you're hiring the cover artist yourself. If you need a formatter, you're either doing it yourself. I don't advise doing your cover yourself. There are a few of us talented people who are authors and able to do covers themselves. But there's a big difference between a really professional cover and a non-professional cover. Take a look at the Frugal Book Promoter cover. The name is reasonably big. It doesn't have a white cover so that it fades out when it's on Amazon I mean, there's a lot of tricks on that book. You can see it when it's in a thumbprint. there are lots of other things that a professional cover will do that takes people many years to learn, really good designers. And even then, they need to take more time to learn how to market using a book cover. So those are things that you need to do your own interior design. You need to get all your own blurbs, you know, all of these things that aren't really writing, aren't really the stuff that you love to do, you have to do yourself. So if you prefer not to do those things, maybe you aren't cut out for self-publishing. The beauty of self-publishing is you're completely on your own. Victor's having problems with me because I'm really having to work hard to remember that I've got him, and he needs to be brought in blue. So maybe what I'm doing is overdoing it, but when you have a publisher, they're doing a lot of that, which leaves you then free to do something else. So they need to make their living too.
Mm.
Furthermore, the books that I truly self-published, like the first edition of the Frugal Book Promoter, I made a lot more money on my per book, but I am not able to sell as many books because I'm doing it all by myself. And if I'm hiring a PR person, then I'm spending the money to do that instead of letting the publisher do it. So it's a trade-off, and you've got to figure out what your personality is, what your time is, how much you have to spend. All those things are things that you consider before you decide what is probably the best way for you to publish. And it isn't cut and dried. As an example, I think overall, you're better off with nonfiction for self-publishing than for fiction, but not always. Just keep in mind that there are a lot of fancy stories also going around about people who self-published and made it big. 50 Shades of Grey as an example. Another one was, she teaches at Long Beach State University, I think, something about bones. You could probably help me with that. It was a literary book with bones in the title, and everybody was lauding it and saying how wonderful it was, her first effort, and how she was a big star right off. Well, that woman spent 40 years learning her craft. I happen to know that because I was a presenter at one of the same writers conferences that she was, and she'd been teaching at a well-known writers program at a big university for a long time. She was no flash in the pan. So, you know, if people go into self-publishing with that in mind, possible, but, you know what your chances are.
All right, Carolyn, thanks everyone for participating. We've run out the clock here and we could go on all day, but we really appreciate the time you put in, Carolyn, and we're going to make this available on YouTube so you guys can tell your friends who are UPPAA members and share the love.
Yeah. It's been really nice talking to all of you. Thank you very much for coming. It was fun. Thanks.
Thanks, Carolyn. It was a real fun, and we've got 6 more of these things. They'll be every Thursday or Saturday for the next 6 weeks. So we hope you. Pardon?
Are you going to put me on your list and notify me so I can come too?
Sure, you're an honorary UPPAA member now. We're gonna make sure you show up.
Wonderful! I can tweet that. Yay!
Okay.
See what I mean?
Bye, everyone.
Every kind of honor you can find, tweet it. Okay. Thanks, you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.